digital health is tough. It's very different to traditional medicine and life sciences. Where does it normally go wrong? And there's quite a lot of failure, sadly, in this sector. It's either the business side of things, wrong business model, don't know who the buyers are, trying to sell to the wrong people, or engagement. If you can't get people to come back and use your products, come services, you don't have much of a business. What is engagement from your perspective, Johannes? Is it more art or science?
What I saw at Dawn, so I came from Observia and I came from obviously a scientific background, right? So for me, it was always a lot about the science, about the behaviors and so on, right? About things that you can predict. Now, I have to be very careful when I say science in that aspect, because I studied science was in natural sciences. So a lot of laws, a lot of rules that were proven over centuries, right? And essentially, the rules are a little bit fluffier. So I think there is a lot of things that you need to get right. There are a lot of things where the science helps you figure out what works and doesn't work in a direction. But the last, I don't know how much, 10, 20, 30% of any development in terms of engagement, that's where the magic happens. And that's where the sort of art needs to come in, because there is a lot of exploration of how you actually make that successful. Because fundamentally, if everyone follows the science, then everything looks the same, and then there's no engagement either, right? So there is sort of an art that really builds into that, and not a lot of people can actually do that right, in my opinion. Most of the time, by the way, that's also where things start to fall apart, in my perspective, because those last 10, 20% tend to be the one that are cut in budgets that sort of then fall short. But yeah, for me, it's honestly foundation, science, and then making it actually come true is then the art.
And for me, marketing can be really fluffy, Andy. Let's put a different set of colors around it. Let's make it glamorous and glossy. But marketing, close to engagement, some of it, science-based, or at least testable, hypothesis and test.
I think ultimately, whichever kind of route I take for this next bit of chat, I'm going to kind of land, more or less where Johannes started, and the fact that it's not entirely science, not entirely art. It is entirely a combination of both, and it's going to vary according to the audience, the objectives, the user journey, the research they've done, the strategy, a whole bunch of different criteria. I think, assuming you're going to meet a client, at some point where they want to market a product and they've done the research, they've produced the strategy, what we typically want to do is start with a testable hypothesis for, what can be done in that online space, right? How do they want to engage that audience? How do they want to convert that audience? If that's a metric that's appropriate, and given most of my experience is going to be B2B, within the life sciences, it's usually not. That's usually not the kind of key metric. It is around engagement. But yeah, you still want to produce a testable hypothesis that you can, attract the audience you're looking for, that you can direct their clicks into the environment that you want to engage them in, and then what happens. From then on, you can make it, more scientific based. You can produce an A/B test pattern, right the way from kind of capturing the eyeballs through to, whatever they do on the site. But ultimately, if you haven't really well understood the audience, if you haven't kind of added a bit of magic into it, and all you have is something that is entirely dry and predictable, then the hypothesis, that whatever hypothesis you've got, you're going to get a pretty poor result at the back end. And yeah, you can iteratively improve it, but I think the magic happens somewhere after the kind of research, the research and the objectives, to kind of figure out, okay, these are the things that we can do to really make a difference, that really add value. This is ultimately where we want to get to. So it's a bit of both, Steve.
Cool. So to pass over to Bryan, following on from Andy's remarks, what kind of role does marketing play for you, Bryan, or is marketing just not part of the equation for you?
I think that the key thing around marketing that comes up in the work that I do with our clients are a lot of times talking about what a adequate go-to-market strategy looks like, and what iterations look like in, say, continuing to test and learn once products are in the market. So staying agile, trying to better understand what interventions are being picked up by which channels, and which audiences are resonating with which value propositions, and this entire process of validating value propositions and in general, the value that a certain digital health solution creates for an audience. I think the challenge really comes when we talk about engagement, which is not the number of downloads, or it's not the number of logins on a website, or the number of times an app is used actually, but trying to really figure out exactly what that value is that it's creating for a user, which comes back to kind of your question, which is, I think that actually engagement in a digital health context is actually very much science more than art, in my opinion. And I think a lot of it comes because in science we should be able to track and to monitor what those improvements or not improvements are, and make certain data-driven decisions to basically improve them, whether it's the marketing channels or how we're creating value. Maybe it's a clinical outcome that we're understanding and learning from, and that's going to drive a lot of interest. And maybe it's understanding actually satisfaction scores or net promoter scores on certain engagements. So I would say it's more science focused in that sense, although you can have a lot of artistic and creative ways to intervene in the patient journey or an HCP journey as well. But so I think marketing is definitely a key component of it, and comes up a lot in, as I mentioned, this go-to-market space, and then kind of the constant growth and value creation of these solutions once they're in the market.